Throughout the Tudor period, there were 6 women who became infamous as they were married to one of history's most evil and tyrannical kings. The wives of Henry VIII had many different fates. 2 lost their head, and 1 died tragically after childbirth. Another survived, 1 died under house arrest, and another was rather fortunate. But there was one woman who was being touted to marry King Henry VIII, but she would have a lucky escape and would keep out of the clutches of the King of England. Christina of Denmark had a very interesting life, but fortunately for her, she managed to avoid becoming one of Henry VIII's wives. Now, Christina was born in central Denmark and was the daughter of King Christian II of Denmark, Sweden and Norway, and his wife, Isabella of Austria. Christina was raised in exile after her father was rebelled against and his throne was offered to his uncle. She was raised by the Dutch regents, but her mother would die in January of 1526 when Christina was around 4 years old. Her father, Christian II, would later be imprisoned in Denmark after he tried to seize his throne again, and in the same year her brother died, and with this Christina became the second in line to her father's claim to the Danish throne, following her older sister, Dorothea. But she was given a decent education by her aunt, the Regent of the Netherlands, and she was a girl of great beauty and great intelligence. She enjoyed riding her horse, and she was seen as a catch for anyone in Europe, and she was used as a pawn by her uncle, Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, to try and build alliances. In 1527, Cardinal Thomas Wolsey, the chief adviser to the English King Henry VIII, suggested that Christina should marry the king's son, the illegitimate Henry Fitzroy, the Duke of Richmond and Somerset. However, Fitzroy was born out of wedlock and was considered someone not suitable for Christina, even though it looked as though Henry VIII was crafting his illegitimate son into becoming his successor. The Duke of Milan in 1531, Francesco Sforza, proposed to marry either Christina or Dorothea, her sister, and with this the marriage was agreed with Christina. On the 23rd of September 1533 in Brussels, the pair married, and Christina became the Duchess of Milan. Her relationship with her husband was good, and she was very popular and was considered a symbol of peace and hope following the long periods of war. She lived rather lavishly, and her palace was redecorated for her. But at the time, her husband was very weak, as years before he had survived a poisoning. But he was never the same after this. He was worried he would not have any heirs, and she and Francesco had no children. And then Christina's husband died in the October of 1535, meaning at just the age of 13 she was a widow. She remained in the city and remained very popular, but there were then questions as to who she should marry next. Charles V continued to refuse matches to Christina, but in the October of 1537 she went to live with her aunt, Queen Mary of Hungary. However, it was around this time that Christina of Denmark was being touted as possibly being the 4th wife of King Henry VIII. It would be another European princess, Anne of Cleves, who would eventually marry the English king. But following the death of Jane Seymour, Henry's 3rd wife, Christina was considered a possible bride. Because of this, German painter Hans Holbein was commissioned to paint portraits of eligible noblewomen who could be possible wives for the English king. On the 10th of March 1538, Hans Holbein arrived in Brussels with the diplomat, Philip Holbein, to meet with Christina and to paint her. Holbein arranged with the master of Christina's household to sit for Holbein the following day. Holbein wanted to paint the most lifelike paintings that he could, and have Christina to show to Henry VIII so that he could decide if he wanted to enter into marriage negotiations with her. The following day, Christina entered the room to be painted, and Holbein must have been shocked by what he saw. Christina sat for 3 hours, but she was wearing a mourning dress, which covered most of her, and the black gown was large in how it appeared. She also wore a hat that covered her hair, meaning that the English king, when he saw this painting, probably wasn't bowled over by her beauty. After 3 hours, Holbein was happy with what he had done, and the room had been decorated for the painting, with black velvet, black damask, and black cloth of estate. Christina at the time, though, was only 16 years old, and she voiced her discontent and opposition to marrying the English king. The reputation of Henry VIII had spread around Europe, and many European dynasties had the impression that he was a man who could slaughter his queens, like he did with Anne Boleyn, fabricating charges to have her executed inside the Tower of London. Henry by this time had mistreated 2 of his wives, with Anne being executed, but also the news of his first wife, Catherine of Aragon's treatment, was common knowledge also. Henry had held her under house arrest and forced her to never see her daughter again, and she died in obscurity. This may be why Christina wanted not the most flattering image painted of her. Catherine of Aragon was also Christina's great aunt, and she knew how she had been treated. She allegedly said, "If I had 2 heads, one should be at the King of England's disposal," saying that she believed if she married Henry, then she would have been executed. Also, Mary of Hungary, her aunt, was not impressed by the possible match, and she was not a fan of Henry VIII either. You see, Mary and Christina's mother were actually the nieces of Henry's first wife, Catherine of Aragon. But regardless of this, Henry VIII continued to pursue a marriage and a match with the younger Christina of Denmark until the January of 1539. But it then became clear to the English that the agreement would never be stricken between Henry and Christina. Henry, though, was allegedly keen, but the attitude of her aunt put the king off. The English diplomat to Brussels, Thomas Rothesay, would later tell Thomas Cromwell that Henry should fix his most noble stomach in other places, saying that the chance of him marrying Christina was slim. But Christina at the time was in love with the Prince of Orange, René of Chalon. The pair courted and the love match was supported, but the regent Mary was against this. But then René was forced to marry Anne of Lorraine, and then declared that Christina was engaged to Anne's brother, Francis of Lorraine, to strengthen alliances. On the 10th of July 1541, Christina married Francis, Duke of Bar, who had previously been betrothed to Anne of Cleves, who then became the 4th wife of King Henry VIII. Francis later, in 1544, became the Duke of Lorraine, and Christina would then act as a political advisor of her husband. Their relationship was considered happy, and they did have a number of interests. But Francis died on the 12th of June 1545, leaving Christina the Regent of Lorraine. Following this, she refused to marry again, but there was a discussion about her marrying the King of Poland, Sigismund. She then made a visit to Brussels to welcome Prince Philip of Spain to the region, and at this time Philip gave Christina a huge amount of attention. But France was preparing for war, and Lorraine, her region, was in danger. She tried to ally herself with the Guise family, but Christina failed to secure help from the Netherlands and the Emperor. She travelled to speak to the French monarch to ask them to respect the neutrality of Lorraine, and this was successful. But then the French turned. She was told not to leave, but her son was taken from her. Further marriage proposals in the next few years came her way, but following the end of the war between France and the Empire, she tried to return to Lorraine following her exile. She did even come to visit England in April of 1555, during the reign of Queen Mary I, and she was welcomed by a huge banquet at Whitehall. The reason for the visit was to allegedly take Princess Elizabeth, the future Elizabeth I, to Europe and marry her to the Duke of Savoy. But this was then blocked by the Queen, and on her visit to England she was shown many Catholic riches and also had a tour of the Tower of London. But Mary's husband, Philip of Spain, continued to show Christina affection, and Mary, it's believed, was very jealous of this. In 1559, her father died in prison in Denmark, and her elder sister then assumed the claimant title to the Queen of Denmark in exile. But she then surrendered this claim, and Christina then claimed that she was the rightful Queen of Denmark, Norway and Sweden. She spent the rest of her life trying to plan how to take what she believed was her throne. However, she died on the 10th of December 1590 at the age of 69. Christina of Denmark was the woman who spent a number of years trying to become the Queen of Denmark, Norway and Sweden, but she was of royal blood. If her father had not been ousted from the throne, then she could have one day been queen. But she could also have very easily become the wife of King Henry VIII, the notorious six-wived King of England. From Henry, she had a very lucky escape, and it's clear that the king would have benefited from alliances with a marriage to the well-connected Christina. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.